President Trump is pulling the plug on former Vice President Kamala Harris's Secret Service detail. Yesterday, President Trump canceled the former Vice President's Secret Service protection. The president sent a letter to Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem that reads in part, quote, "You are hereby authorized to discontinue any security-related procedures previously authorized by executive memorandum beyond those required by law for the following individual. Effective September 1, 2025, former Vice President Kamala D. Harris," end quote. Now, I should note, former vice presidents do receive 6 months of protection after leaving office. That would mean Harris's Secret Service protection would have expired in July, but her protection had been extended for an additional year by President Joe Biden in the weeks before he left office. Also tonight, a federal judge is considering a request to temporarily block the Trump administration from removing Federal Reserve Governor Lisa Cook. The request comes from Cook's lawyer, Abby Lowell. The decision is up to United States District Court judge in Washington, D.C., Gia Cobb, and today Judge Cobb said she would set an expedited briefing schedule in the case. She asked both sides to submit further arguments, with Cook's next filing due September 2. Meanwhile, according to the Associated Press, Republican Iowa Senator Joni Ernst is hanging it up. She's calling it quits. She will not be seeking re-election in 2026. Senator Ernst is expected to make the formal announcement this September. And host of John Bachman Now, John Bachman joins me. How do you come up with the name of the show, your show?
We thought about it. We put out a focus group, Greta. It was researched, and then eventually we settled on that one.
Great name. Anyway, welcome to Washington. Of course, you're here a lot, usually down south in our other bureau. But all right, let me talk about Vice President Kamala Harris. What happened?
I think somebody finally got to Kamala Harris's security detail, probably realized how much it's costing. You know, and I know the law states that they're only supposed to have this for 6 months after she left office. It's been 6 months. It's now in August. It was supposed to expire in July. But what's been surprising to me, Greta, is the response from Democrats and a lot of Donald Trump's media haters. They don't read the law, or they don't care about what the law actually says. I'm looking at a tweet here specifically from Adam Schiff, and this is his response to the news. Quote, "Another dangerous reminder that there's no agenda more important to Donald Trump than retribution. He feeds conspiracy theories to his followers, makes their targets more vulnerable, then pulls their security. This is a dark road, and we have a president that is all too willing to drive us down it." Like, Adam Schiff does not know that Donald Trump there was two assassination attempts on his life that we know about. And, you know, again, I think Adam Schiff knows the law, but he's willing to twist this around, gin up, you know, anger about
Well, he certainly doesn't like President Trump. I mean, that's plain.
Yes.
I don't think President Trump could ever do right in his eyes. At least I don't think so.
And he's not alone, too. This is a constant refrain that you're seeing on social media now in response to Donald Trump's decision, which he gave her an extra month of Secret Service protection. Two
months. You know, though, I mean, the thing that we don't know, and it would be fair, is that if someone has threats, when President Obama was president, there were so many threats against him, the Secret Service. Same thing with President Trump. They're getting threats coming in over the transom. There are threats so many. You never hear much about threats to the vice president. I mean, they are sort of out of the way. Dick Cheney probably was an exception because he was thought of sort of being the architect of the war, the Iraq War. But if she has no threats, then, you know, it makes sense.
Yeah, and I think, too, I don't think Donald Trump is that depraved that there were legitimate threats against Kamala Harris's life, that he would actually want her to be in danger. The other aspect of this, too, Greta, is we did some segments about Kamala Harris's upcoming book tour for 107 days. She has tickets for sale that are upwards of $1,200 for a single ticket to go see her. She's obviously made a lot of money from her book advance. She's a very successful woman. She has a lot of private money. Her husband, Doug Emhoff, is a successful guy. She's in a position now where she can afford her own private security detail. The taxpayer should not be forfeiting the bill.
Actually, if she didn't have a book tour and she were just at home, she wouldn't. I mean, it would not be very expensive for security. Right. But the question is really is that when someone goes out on a private book tour and enhances visibility, should that person have it or not? And if she's going out there on the book tour, because it also means the Secret Service drives her around, picks her up at the plane, we have to pay for the tickets for the Secret Service. I mean, it is really a huge expense when the Secret Service moves.
Right, it's true. And, you know, there was a period of time after the 2020 election when the Secret Service detail for Donald Trump Jr., Eric Trump, the whole Trump family ended. It came to its conclusion. The other thing, too, about this that I think, you know, is worth talking about is all the decisions made by Joe Biden, or whoever was making the decisions for Joe Biden with the auto pen at the end of his presidency. Do we actually know that this decision was made by Joe Biden? Was this something Kamala Harris did? She went into the Oval Office maybe and asked somebody if they could do this. It is at the president's discretion to do this, but it's also at Donald Trump's discretion now, who is the president, to put an end to it.
In some ways, it's a fair discussion because in the beginning of his administration, President Biden, I don't think there'd be any question, but after we saw his performance at the debate in late June of 2024, and this was signed in January of 2025, they extended it before he left office. You know, it's a fair question. Who signed it? Whose judgment was it?
There's the pardon issue, and there's also one thing that I keep coming back to, and that is the anecdote that we hear from Speaker Mike Johnson when he went to go talk to President Biden about the offshore oil permits, and Joe Biden had no idea that he had signed an executive order preventing those. I think it was natural gas drilling offshore, a ban on that. And when Mike Johnson went to ask him about why he did that, Joe Biden had no recollection of signing that executive order. That is also, I think, suspect in who was actually calling the shots in the final days, I guess the last year of the Biden presidency. In
the end, though, with Kamala Harris, I would like to hear from the head of the Secret Service to find out whether or not she is getting threats, because that would influence my opinion completely on this issue. Right now, yeah. I don't think she needs it, but if she's getting threats, yes, I do.
Yeah, and I think everyone can agree. No one wants to see anything bad happen to anyone, Kamala Harris or otherwise. And if there are legitimate threats against her life, I highly doubt Donald Trump would allow the Secret Service security detail to end.
John Bachman of the famous John Bachman Show. It's a great name. I ought to try that. I think I'll call my show that.
Great to see you.
Anyway, nice to see you, John. And crime. Is crime in our nation's capital down, even way down? Well, President Trump says it is. The president, writing on Truth Social, quote, carjacking in D.C. is down 87%. All other categories of crime are likewise down massively since I got involved. D.C. will soon be a crime-free zone in only 14 days, far faster than scheduled, end quote. Meanwhile, the United States has a new big crime threat coming from China. According to an agent at the DEA, Jonathan Pullen, the United States is behind the curve in fighting a deadly new synthetic narcotic called nitazene. Nitazenes can be up to 43 times stronger than fentanyl, and fentanyl, as you probably remember, is about 50 to 100 times as strong as morphine. And this gets scarier. Nitazenes are also resistant to Narcan. According to Pullen, nitazenes are produced in China, and guess who China works with on the distribution? You guessed it, Mexican cartels. Former acting DEA Administrator Derek Maltz joins me. Good evening, sir. And how big a problem is this nitazene? I mean, it certainly is deadly if you get it, but is it coming over our borders?
Greta, thanks for having me. Number one, this is an ongoing campaign by the CCP to destabilize America by using these dangerous, deadly chemical substances that are made in the labs in China. It's not just nitazene. It's etinitazene, it's protonitazene, metanitazene, xylazine, carfentanil. Of course, America's just catching up on fentanyl now. This has been killing, as you can see behind me, kids all over America dying, even babies are dying. So yes, we have a very serious problem in America. And of course, the Chinese nationals are also growing marijuana at record levels, and they're spraying the crops with Chinese pesticides. That's why we're seeing increases in schizophrenia, psychosis of these young American kids. So China is basically pushing out these dangerous substances to harm our citizens. So America has to start doing a lot more. We have to be way more aggressive to address this threat.
All right, what do you mean by way more aggressive? Like, do what? I mean, it's not like the old days, 40 years ago when to drag a bale of marijuana across the Mexican border of the United States was a hard task because everybody could see it. You bring a little fentanyl or nitazene across the border and you can put it in your pocket like a crushed up aspirin. So tell me, what is it we can do? How do we convince the Chinese not to be flooding our hemisphere, and how do we convince them not to work with the cartels? Because the cartels sure get rich off this.
Well, President Trump has done a great job dealing with China. He's going to do more. He's negotiating now, the tariffs, everything else. But let me just put it in perspective. You see these babies here? They're dying at record levels. These aren't drug users. They don't have substance use disorder. We have families around America that are trying to get the awareness. I know President Trump and the administration just started this campaign to be able to put commercials out there fentanyl-free America, which is great. We have to do way more on the demand side because the kids today are under a lot more pressure. There's depression, there's anxiety after COVID, there's been social isolation. There's a lot of issues with mental illness support in America. So we have to be aggressive and make sure everyone in America is educated on these particular issues. This is not, as I say, grandpa's opioid crisis. We're way beyond that. It's destroying a future generation. It's killing American military officials at record levels. It's killing, all types of people from all walks of life. It's not red or blue issue. It's a red, white, and blue issue, Greta. So we have to be way more aggressive. Fortunately, law enforcement now is working closer together now than ever. President Trump has made it very clear that we're going to have a whole-of-government approach. So I expect big results. I love the fact that military assets are off the coast of Venezuela. I look forward to an apprehension of President Maduro and other cartel leaders.
All right, well, let me take the last word on this. Is rather distressing. As you might imagine, I read the news 10 hours a day, 7 days a week. I've been steeped in it for years, and it wasn't until very recently that I heard of nitazene. So that's how I expect I would be aware. It's sort of on the front line, and it's taken me a long time to get this. So you really, the message really does need to get out because this is so frightfully dangerous. Derek Maltz, thank you, sir.
Greta, just so you know, I've been talking about this a couple of years.
Well, you get credit. I just can't, I'm just saying that I don't get any, I'm just getting started. So thank you for doing that, Derek. Thank you.
Thank you so much for bringing the topic up. Have a nice day.
Thank you. And on Wednesday, 23-year-old Robin Westman killed 2 kids, injured many others. Westman opened fire during a back-to-school mass at the Annunciation Catholic School in Minneapolis. Yesterday, the father of the 8-year-old shooting victim delivered an emotional statement.
Yesterday, a coward decided to take our 8-year-old son Fletcher away from us. Because of their actions, we will never be allowed to hold him, talk to him, play with him, and watch him grow into the wonderful young man he was on the path to becoming. Fletcher loved his family, friends, fishing, cooking, and any sport that he was allowed to play. While the hole in our hearts and lives will never be filled, I hope that in time our family can find healing. I pray that the other victim's family can find some semblance of the same, as our family and the Annunciation community grieve and try to make sense of such a senseless act of violence. Please remember Fletcher for the person he was and not the act that ended his life. Give your kids an extra hug and kiss today. We love you, Fletcher. You'll always be with us.
And coming up, smartphone detox. One town trying to regulate residents' screen time to 2 hours per day, adults included. Is this your town? And could you do it? That when the record continues. 1 million people are expected to be displaced as Israel pushes ahead with its plan to take over the Gaza Strip. The IDF declaring that the famine-struck Gaza City is a, quote, dangerous combat zone. The Israeli military has ended tactical pauses as it prepares to carry out its assault on what remains of the Palestinian territory. Since the Hamas massacre on October 7, 2023, today the head of the UN Palestinian refugee is calling on Israel to immediately stop its military operation. The agency warns the military operation will only lead to disaster and a higher death toll.
We have in Gaza nearly 1 million people between the city and the northern governorate who basically have nowhere to go, have no resource even to move.
The World Health Organization, WHO, says another crisis is facing Gaza. It has run out of critical medical supplies. Meanwhile, the body of another hostage held by Hamas has been recovered. 55-year-old Ilan Weiss was a resident of the kibbutz Be'eri. The Israeli military says Weiss was kidnapped from his home on October 7th and killed. His wife and daughter were also kidnapped. But in November 2023, they were released as part of a hostage prisoner swap. Items belonging to a second person kidnapped that day were also retrieved. The identity of that person, though, has not yet been released. As of now, 49 hostages remain held by Hamas. Only 20 are believed to be alive. Middle East correspondent Zach Anders is in Tel Aviv, where it is 1:17 in the morning there. Zach?
Greta, as we come on the air, we do have some breaking news taking shape in Gaza. We do not have this news confirmed, but right now there is an incredible amount of military activity that we see taking place in the Zaytun neighborhood that's just to the west of Gaza City, which we'll be talking about at length here in this report. The rumors that are circulating right now is that several IDF soldiers have either been killed or potentially captured by Hamas, and this has been picked up online by Russian news agencies, and that's why it's getting so much spread on social media right now. I want to stress we don't have that confirmed, and this appears to have originated from Hamas Telegram channels to begin with. So I will admit that there is an a high amount of military activity with the IDF taking place. It looks like they're engaged in a heavy battle as we speak in this part of Gaza. But the rumors that are circulating right now, we do not have confirmed. But this does appear that we'll wake up to some major headlines just based on experience, and the level of fighting that is taking place right now is unusual. And this is the entirety of Gaza City now that we're talking about, that the IDF now considers to be an active combat zone. That's the news today that they announced would be taking shape. And that does not mean that they're still, or that they will end providing pre-warnings, evacuation notices to specific targets that they will strike from the air, but they are stressing to the remaining population in Gaza City that the entirety of that city is now a combat zone in their eyes. Now, before the war, more than 500,000 people lived within Gaza City. That's Gaza's largest city here. And images today show many of those Palestinians reacting to the announcement, and the IDF's urging people to leave Gaza City by doing exactly that. They're packing up their belongings and heading south. And this marks another period of migration for many Gazans who are moved to the north into the city when the Israeli offensive focused on the south of the Gaza Strip earlier in this war. They're now being told to move again back into the south. The problem with that is many of these populated areas in the south, like Rafah, I've seen it with my own eyes, they've been completely destroyed by the fighting or Israeli bulldozers, which work, it seems, 24/7 to knock down remaining structures. And that's been a lot of the criticism towards the Israelis as they raise some of these populated areas after the fights are over, that they're just knocking buildings down so that nobody can return. Israel says the goal here is to enter Gaza City, which they really have not hit hard. They've hit hard with airstrikes, but this is now ground offensive. Ground forces are now moving in. As you see the map there, they're moving in from the east of Gaza City, which really runs all the way up to the Israeli border. It's a huge city. They're moving in from the outskirts on the east, and Zaytun you see on that map there, that's where that battle is taking place tonight. Israeli forces were already there, but not at strength, not as much as we see along the east, along that border. So there's a heavy battle taking place in Zaytun tonight, and we know that Israeli forces are stationed heavily in Jabalia, which you see on the north of that map as well. Now, there's no clear picture for how long this offensive plans to take, and it is believed from Israeli sources telling me that the Hamas tunnel network underneath Gaza City, that's largely still intact. Now, as you mentioned, this while the IDF today announcing that 2 bodies of slain hostages have been recovered and returned to Israel. Ilan Weiss is believed to have been killed on October 7th when he was engaged with Hamas invaders. He was attempting to protect his community. As you mentioned, members of his family were taken hostage alive and have since been released. His body was taken on October 7th into Gaza. It's been there for more than 690 days. Another hostage has been recovered. The Israeli authorities have yet to announce the identity of that second recovery. That brings the number of total hostages in Gaza down to 48, 20 of whom Israel believes are still alive. And these are pictures from Sana'a, Yemen today. Thousands march for the weekly show of solidarity with the Palestinians. Comes one day after an Israeli decapitation strike targeted Houthi leadership. While the IDF has yet to state whether they believe the strike was a success, they say they're still assessing. It's believed the terror group's chief of staff, defense minister, and several other senior figures were all gathered at the same location. And reports suggest the Houthi prime minister was also killed. The IDF again says it's still evaluating the success of this strike. The Houthis have yet to fire any missiles at Israel since the strike as well. And you'll notice as we read off the list of who was gathered there, those all sound like official titles for a recognized terrorist organization. That's because the Houthis are essentially the government of Yemen. There is an internationally recognized government in Yemen, but it's completely ineffective. And the Houthis primarily run all of the day-to-day services, the buses, the different levels of government apparatus here. So that is where we stand at this point tonight. And again, as I mentioned at the top of the report, there is an intense battle taking place as we speak, with Israeli forces engaged with Hamas outside Gaza City. We don't have official word from the IDF that they've begun their ground offensive inside Gaza City, but they really, this is based on experience. They won't tell us until these offensives have already begun. And based on what we're seeing tonight, I would likely wager that we are watching the beginning or the opening salvo of what should be, if they go in at the force levels that they built up around the city, will be the largest offensive of this war. And that will certainly spell disaster for all of those folks that are still remaining in the city, because it's largely being surrounded right now. And you have to imagine, too, with the level of fatalities the IDF has suffered in other offensive, like they did in Han Yunis and in Rafah, that they will certainly encounter casualties in their own ranks as well. And again, that's the reports that we're getting tonight. There's been some sort of severe event. The IDF is reacting as such, and we see helicopters shuttling in towards Israeli hospitals. I'm not sure, again, the exact circumstances of what is taking place. Just a massive fight is taking place in Gaza tonight. Greta?
Zach Anders in Tel Aviv, thank you. Okay, do you feel like you might be addicted to your smartphone? Constantly scrolling, checking, scrolling again, that never stops? Well, you're not alone. A study found in 2024, Americans average more than 5 hours a day on their phones. It sounds a lot. To put it in context, it adds up to a staggering 2.5 months of your life on your phone in a single year. What is more than the average American checked his or her phone 205 times a day, or about once every 5 minutes. 81% check it within 10 minutes of waking up. And usage varies with each generation. The younger generation, the longer the screen time. Gen Z, for example, spends nearly 6.5 hours a day on their phones. On the other end, baby boomers clock about 4 hours per day. This phone addiction appears to be universal. Officials in one Japanese town are trying to fix it. They are debating an ordinance that would restrict all residents to just 2 hours a day. All residents, not just the kids. And the idea is not going over well with the town's 69,000 residents. It sparked a social media backlash, some users calling it an attack on individual freedom. If the ordinance passes, it will go into effect next month, but it is not mandatory. Officials say they just want families to recognize the negative health impact excessive phone use has on adults and on their children. Coming up, California Governor Gavin Newsom accused of being a copycat. That when the record continues. You will remember back in June, President Trump ordered troops to Los Angeles to quell protests against ICE. California Governor Gavin Newsom criticized Trump, saying that Trump was militarizing cities. Well, now Governor Newsom has come up with his own new crime-fighting plan. It involves the deployment of state police. Newsom says that state officers will work with local law enforcement in major cities in California. Those cities include Los Angeles, San Diego, San Francisco. And yesterday, while discussing his new plans, Newsom was criticized Trump's crackdown on crime. The governor suggested that Trump is a dictator. Newsom also said the president should be focusing on other states than California.
But I should note, just on that, if he is to invest in crime suppression, I hope the president of the United States would look at the facts. Just consider Speaker Johnson's state and district. Just look at the murder rate. That's nearly 4 times higher than California's. In Louisiana, this is Speaker Johnson, 4x higher. Mississippi leads the nation as the #1 murder state in America. Imagine this in particular may resonate with the President of the United States. It's got a murder rate, it's 180%. 180% higher than Los Angeles. It's interesting. LA has more people. These are all per capita numbers. More people than Los Angeles. Perhaps the president could deploy the National Guard in every corner of Mississippi. It's the murder rate's out of control there. Carnage.
Former Los Angeles County Sheriff Alex Villanueva joins me. Good evening, sir.
Good evening. How are you doing?
I'm very well. And I think it's fair to say that nobody knows the state of crime than the people who live in the area, and especially the men and women who wear the uniforms. So tell me, do you have a crime problem in Los Angeles County? And do you want the assistance of the federal government, specifically President Trump?
Well, we do have a crime problem in Los Angeles. Oh, of course we do. We do have a problem of the media covering the fact that they're pretending there is no crime problem here. And the federal government, with all of their investigative resources they have, could be of value to fighting crime here in LA, because there are so many things going on between transnational crime, the burglary, tourism, you name it. We definitely could use the help.
What's sort of interesting to me, Governor Newsom has a new plan as well. He wants to use state forces, and good for him having a new plan. However, it took getting into a little bit of a battle with President Trump, and President Trump saying to him basically by action is that there is another way than just sitting there and watching. You could invoke, and he's decided to invoke the state. But looking at the Governor Newsom's plan using state versus President Trump using federal, which do you think would be more effective?
I think there's nothing more effective than having your local law enforcement be fully staffed to be able to address the problems at a local level. Sending the California Highway Patrol to communities that they're unfamiliar with to do proactive police work that doesn't involve enforcing traffic laws is not really something that's going to be terribly effective in terms of lowering crime rates. And if you look at the statistics they're producing, they're very high on traffic offenses, DUIs, for example, but very low on felony arrests that count in terms of, preventing, obviously, robberies, things like that. Takeover robberies, home invasion, burglaries, those things.
Are you suggesting, they're saying to me that you have enough people? I mean, I'm assuming you can get the full complement of your staff. I think you might have said that you don't have your full staff, but it's simply a manner of management where you're sending your local police, that you wouldn't need help from the state or the federal you're the former sheriff now, but if they were sent to the right neighborhoods and the right communities. You don't need help. You just need the people managed correctly.
Well, the thing is that there's skeleton staffing levels now between the LA County Sheriff and the LAPD. If Newsom, for example, wants to avail his personnel to be effective, he should be pairing up Highway Patrol with local law enforcement so they have the local knowledge. That would be far more effective. And then what he's proposing here, because that is just a photo op, a surge of personnel. It's not really going to be sustainable, effective.
Why do you have a skeletal staff in the LAPD and the county sheriff? Is it, why don't people want to be police officers there?
Well, 10 years of a war against law enforcement that Governor Newsom himself is very proud to be a part of. He signed every single piece of legislation coming out of Sacramento that was anti-law enforcement and pro-criminal. So the hostile environment of hiring people here in California to become peace officers is such that he's part of the problem. He's not the solution.
Well, it seems, listening to you, that the management is, would be a great effort to solve it. After you got to fill the ranks, which takes some time. You've got to change some of the laws, perhaps, to facilitate that. But in the short run, do you want the assistance of the federal assistance from President Trump or from Gavin Newsom to help him? Would you? I know you're former sheriff, but would you want, in the short run, to resolve the other problems?
In the short run, I would say, yes, please send me the resources. However, let me be the one to decide where to allocate them so they're used to their best of their abilities and correspond to what they can legally do. For example, National Guard troops can't enforce state law, but I can have Highway Patrol enforcing state law, for example. So the resources can be of use, but they have to be used wisely, and they have to be located with the community in mind.
Sir, thank you very much for joining me.
You got it.
Okay, could you be number 814? What's so great about being number 814? Well, Forbes says last year there were 813 billionaires in the United States. The next one will be 814, and it could be you. But first you must win the next Powerball. The jackpot is currently about $1 billion. It is the 6th largest jackpot in the game's history. If you win, and I sure hope you do, if I can't win, I hope you do, and if you take the cash option, that brings your winnings down a tad bit. The cash payout is about $453 million, but that could still buy you, we've done the math, America's most expensive home. The property is in Aspen, Colorado. Its price tag, $300 million, 18 bedrooms, 20 bathrooms, and after buying that house, you would still have $153 million in your pocket. If you decide to test your luck on this Powerball, tickets are $2 a pop. The winning numbers will be drawn on Saturday. No one has won the Powerball in nearly 3 months. Coming up, something that really, really annoys me, and it should annoy you. That when the record continues. You know from watching this news show, I hate the overuse and unnecessary use of anonymous sources. There is, of course, a need for some anonymous sources in journalism, but only rarely. National security or whistleblowers are good examples, but it should be rare. In recent years, the overuse of anonymous sources has become literally an epidemic in news organizations. Overuse of anonymous sources, it's just gossip. And gossip can not only be wrong, but it's terribly unfair. Journalism is not supposed to be an anonymous platform for drive-by insulting ambushes by cowards who won't go on the record, or for people to push a dishonest agenda. We don't permit anonymous sources in the courtroom. It's a good reason. Anonymous source information can't be tested for accuracy, truthfulness, and it can be just plain fiction since you have no idea who said it. When a journalist writes an article, especially one highly critical of someone, wouldn't you want to know who is making the critical statements so you can judge if it's fair or if it's just a hit piece? I do. Which brings me to this, an article in Politico today. It trashed Steve Witkoff, special envoy to the Middle East. Now, I'm going to take you through the article line by line, listing all the anonymous sources, then that's all it is. So sit down, because this won't be fast, because the list is disgracefully long. The article about Witkoff begins citing as its source some frustrated U.S. and Ukrainian officials. Sources aren't named. Who are they? Even their home countries are not named. Politico's next source, 7 people familiar with internal discussions. What are their names? No idea. Not one of the 7 is named. And as for the internal discussions, what in the world is that? You can't even try to guess accurately. Politico's next source is 2 who said Witkoff misses the mark. Those 2 who supposedly said that, they're not named. Who are they? I wonder what Politico was thinking when it printed that insult, and anonymous it is. Politico certainly didn't consider fairness and decency, since without those names or other specifics, Witkoff can't even begin to defend himself from this insult. You know that's not fair. Politico goes on with more anonymous sources and writes, many of those familiar with Witkoff's role in the negotiations. Who are they? The many familiar with Witkoff's role. No names. And how familiar? No information. You're going to have to guess. Politico goes on, next sourcing, a senior administration official. Who's that? The senior administration official. Politico doesn't identify that person. Just writes that with the expectation you're going to believe it because Politico said that. Next, Politico must be feeling a bit weary about the no sources, so it beefs it up a little bit with this. It, meaning the article, is based on conversations with 13 people. Well, what 13 people? Not one name. That's the biggest joke on you. You are supposed to believe this hit piece on Witkoff because Politico says 13 nameless, faceless people said this to one of their reporters. Is that a reason? Remember, it was Politico who published that dopey letter from the so-called 51 intel officials right before the 2020 election that turned out to be wrong. Apparently, they didn't do much or any fact-checking on that one, but they published it. So it's hard not to be a skeptic without more information when an article is just anonymous sources like the one today. So let's go back to today's article about Steve Witkoff. More sources. It says, many of its sources were granted anonymity to discuss sensitive negotiations. Many? I think it's all of them, not just many. Politico granted an anonymity to all their sources in this article since no one is named. They're all anonymous. The article goes on with its anonymous sourcing. It says, a number of these people. What people? Who? Who do they mean? And what is this number of these people? 3, 4, 5 more? How about a name for even just one of these people? Crickets. You're not going to get it. Politico's next source. A person familiar with the diplomatic effort. Okay, who? no name. The article goes on citing as a source a second senior administration official. Of course, that senior administration official is not named either, just like the first senior administration official was not named. More sources in this article are described, not by name, but called his, meaning Witkoff's, detractors. Well, that one's plain. The tone of the article is to trash Witkoff. All the anonymous sources are his detractors. Just read it. No one has the courage to go on the record, and Politico doesn't make them go on the record. The article goes on, and next insults Witkoff with this. Witkoff is a rogue actor. And Politico's source? You guessed it, anonymous. A U.S. official familiar with his style. Familiar with his style? That's a really weird one. What does that mean? The article goes on citing 5 people with familiarity with internal discussions. Well, you knew this was coming. Not one of the 5 is named. So I'm not finished. There are more. The second senior administration official, statements from 6 people. Of course, not one of the 6 is named. More anonymous references. Here it goes. People familiar with Witkoff's style. And there are more anonymous sources. 4 people familiar with the dynamics of the office. Of course, Politico doesn't name one of the 4. All anonymous. The article keeps going. Its next source, which is my favorite, bunch of staff. None of the bunch of staff is identified. And of course, how many is a bunch of staff? Would that be 4, 5, 6, 7, 8? How many is that? Politico sure keeps you guessing. This is like a game show. It's not journalism, that's for sure. And there's more. A U.S. official not identified, and it keeps going, more references to other anonymous sources in this article, and then a new one. The person familiar with his diplomatic efforts. Of course, not named. Brother, it's tiring, isn't it? The article goes on, even citing as a source on the 7th page, European officials. Of course, not one European official is identified, not even what European nation the officials are from. And I am going to stop here, though, even though it does go on and on. The article, absolutely shameful. It isn't fair to the subject, Steve Witkoff, who I have never met in person. He's been on the show, but I've never met him in person. But it does make you wonder when you read a story like this, with it's all anonymous sources and trashing them. Why does anyone want to serve in our government when you're going to get treated like this? It's also not fair to you, the news consumer. You deserve more than an unsubstantiated, unsourced gossip. That's all this is. Coming up, you won't believe this fight and where it happened. You're going to see the video next when the record continues. I think it's fair to say there is some tension in the Mexican Senate. On Wednesday, during a debate in the Mexican Senate over the United States' involvement in the fight against drug cartels, 2 senior politicians traded blow. In the video on your screen is the head of the opposition Institutional Revolutionary Party, Alejandro Alito Moreno, and the Senate president of the ruling Morena Party, Geraldo Fernandez Noronha. They're obviously violently shoving each other. The altercation began after lawmakers finished singing Mexico's national anthem to close the day's session. According to the New York Post, the Morena Party and its allies accused the opposition Institutional Revolutionary Party of calling for the United States military to intervene in Mexico. Meanwhile, 20 years ago today, Katrina levied her wrath, and boy, did she have a lot of it. On August 25th, 2005, Hurricane Katrina made landfall as a Category 1 storm in Florida, but she didn't stop there. She intensified to a Category 5 hurricane, and her next target on August 29th was in southeast Louisiana and then in Mississippi. Initial reports from New Orleans, Louisiana, suggested the damage from Hurricane Katrina was about other hurricanes had inflicted on the city. But then, as the sun came up and the rain kept coming down, the levees that protect New Orleans failed. When the levees failed, water flooded the entire city. At least 80% of New Orleans was flooded. And you can see the devastation on your screen. People were stranded on rooftops. Thousands ended up on the interstate trying to flee to safety. And they were stuck there in the heat for days. Thousands took shelter in the New Orleans Superdome ahead of the storm. But they were then trapped there for days with limited food and water. According to the National Hurricane Center, an estimated 1,833 people died. The majority of deaths were recorded in New Orleans. It took 3 days for the National Guard to get into New Orleans. Search and rescue operations, as well as evacuations, were delayed due to Hurricane Katrina wiping out the communications grid. On August 31st, 2005, then-President George W. Bush left California en route home to Washington, D.C. He flew over New Orleans for a look. The picture you see on your screen is of then-President Bush looking out the window of Air Force One at the devastation. President Bush was not able to land due to conditions on the ground in New Orleans. A few days after Hurricane Katrina hit, I was on the ground in New Orleans, the devastation unimaginable. Here's a picture of me, though, with the Dallas SWAT team. These men were my security due to how lawless New Orleans was after Hurricane Katrina hit. Here's what a few victims had to say after the devastating hurricane.
It's not about low income. It's not about rich people, poor people. It's about people. Nobody wants to hurt anybody in this city. Nobody wants to hurt these people who have these businesses. These babes, 6 and 8 months. They people just walking past us.
It's so horrible. It's just unimaginable what happened. On October 15th, when things calmed down just a bit, then President Bush landed in New Orleans.
Throughout the area hit by the hurricane, we will do what it takes. We will stay as long as it takes to help citizens rebuild their communities and their lives. And all who question the future of the Crescent City need to know there is no way to imagine America without New Orleans. And this great city will rise again.
And despite efforts to rebuild the community, some areas to this day, 20 years later, have never returned to what they once were. Coming up, what do you expect to see if you go whale watching? Not this. That one, the record continues. This is something you do not see every day. Passengers aboard a whale watch tour see a performance not from whales, but from dolphins. A pod of more than 100 dolphins jumping through the waves 10 feet into the air, keeping up with the ship. They're so athletic. What a show. Ralph Schmidt tonight is up next. Have a great weekend. People think news just happens. It doesn't. It happens because there's someone there to capture the moment, to explain it and share it. That's my job. I go where news breaks and give you the facts. Join me for The Record on Newsmax.